From the Lean Enterprise Institute in Boston, this is the WLEI Podcast, where we share stories of people making the world better through lean thinking and practice. For more information about LEI, including how we can help you apply lean thinking, please visit lean.org.
Hello, I'm Lex Schroeder, and my guest today on the WLEI Podcast is Mari Zumbro, co-founder and COO of the tech startup Filament. In this episode, Mari and I discuss how to build high-performing product development teams that effectively leverage AI to achieve exceptional results, AI's impact on the environment, why product development is a team sport, and more. Thanks so much for joining us, Mari. I'd love to start with you introducing yourself and telling us a bit about what you and your team are building at Filament. Full disclosure to the audience, Mari and I worked together at Twitter once, back when Twitter was Twitter. That was the time. So I'd love to hear you speak about what brought you to your current work as well, Mari.
Yes, thanks, Lex. We did work together at Twitter. What a time. I can't believe it's already been almost 4 years, I think.
Yeah.
I right now am the COO and co-founder of Filament. A little bit more about me, because I think it's part of my journey to get here. I grew up in Oakland, California. My dad was a teacher. My mom was an elevator mechanic, and they, I think, instilled a lot of confidence in me, wanting to try to build things, tinker with things, think about systems. And growing up in Oakland, I got to be around some of the most beautiful intersectional communities. I care deeply about community building, and I ended up in the startup world because I love to tinker. I like to learn really quickly on the job. Quick example, in 2018, when I was working in the B2B startup world, I started a small organization that was about organizing women's sports watch parties called Modern Sports. There was no guarantee at the time that games would be on TV at bars, and so I wanted space to watch with other fans. Super small, super fun, grassroots, and now 7 years later, it's fun to go to Valkyrie's games. It's our WNBA team in person. And I got to translate that from startup in my corporate life and then personal life, starting organizations in 2019 when I merged community again, when I joined with digital spaces, when I joined Twitter. And that's where I got to see the ins and outs of how people were building communities online in a much bigger and more public way. As you know, there's a lot of magic in that and a lot of chaos. Downsides. For a lot of my time there, I worked on health teams and saw very closely how people felt unsafe to post online a lot of the time. A lot of people on Twitter were just reading, in part because they were afraid of the reply guys and becoming the main character. At the end of my tenure there, I was on the team that was focused on trying new things. How are we going to solve for this? Things like fleets, which was disappearing tweets, circles, spaces. And then there was this kind of larger question about, if this is how it's working right now, should we go down more of a creator model than one where people are having real conversations? So when Twitter was acquired and I was given a fork in the road, I chose the leaving fork. And I had a lot of time to spend exploring and thinking about what a better way could be to connect online. And I started exploring the professional space with my now co-founder, Tony Hale, another former Twitter colleague of ours. When we started talking to folks over that year, we noticed this shift, not just in conversations online, but professional work was becoming more fluid. More and more people were moved to and interested in fractional work. There were smaller core teams pulling in outside collaborators more fluidly across companies. There's also all these really big challenges like climate change where you need to collaborate across disciplines to address it. But the tools for this kind of connection haven't kept up. They weren't designed for professionals. People are stitching together things like Discord servers, which is great. Discord's wonderful, but it's not designed for professionals. If you're in a WhatsApp group with tons of people, you just see a bunch of phone numbers, not who's in it. So people are pinning spreadsheets about who is who in this group, what is their background, and still relying so heavily on email threads. And in these spaces, context gets lost. Knowledge stays in these private groups, and sometimes the momentum or the conversation dies out because of just simply the way we're trying to convene. Even recruitment and finding jobs has changed. traditional hiring is starting to break or may already be broken, especially as people see something like Chat GPT reflected in people's glasses. I think an article just came out the other day about someone having four jobs, four full-time jobs. And professional communities are sometimes the new recruitment channel. I think we talked about this, Lex, you and I, a little bit with the Smithies. These trains of trust become the verification system that resumes used to provide. And that's ultimately why we decided to start Filament. Like, I believe deeply there's a tool that needs to exist for professional communities, specifically places where that trust already exists, but the infrastructure to collaborate across the orgs is missing. So when we think about Filament, think about high trust, invite only, topic based rooms, and group chats. So rich profiles connected to group chats. So I can see, oh, you worked here, and the tools that we add on to help you pick up the conversational threads long after we hop on a Zoom together or we meet at a conference. It's designed for how we connect professionals now versus 10 years ago.
I love this. This is so interesting to me. It's like, I'm in climate tech now, and if I wasn't in climate tech, this is the other space I'd be in, because it's just fascinating how people connect or can't connect or are prevented from connecting meaningfully, and respect for knowledge and making sure knowledge gets shared. So thank you for the work you do. I happen to be a fan. But one of the reasons I also wanted to speak with you is because I was struck by how at Filament, you say it right on the website. You're not only trying to build teams that feel, quote, safe to create. So there's the whole psychological safety piece, but you also just want to break down silos across teams and even across organizations. It sounds like you're doing good work around not just helping knowledge flow, like I said, in more directions, given that all the challenges we're facing today, while still respecting privacy. But, there's this larger aim. Can you tell me more about this?
Yes. Knowledge sharing and privacy. I feel like you're hitting on a really core tension that we think about and design for every day. How do you protect trust and privacy while also helping knowledge and information move across teams and between groups? I think that is a true tension. And right now I feel it in a lot of the most meaningful conversations I have happen in private spaces like group chats, DMs, Slack communities even. There was a popular article passed around, at least our crew, because we're in the group chat space, but how more and more people are using Signal, not just because of Signalgate. And it makes sense. Imagine if like you had a dinner party where anyone could come or was invited. Not the perfect analogy, but you can think about how that conversation may not be as focused or as trusted. Small group chats are great for safety, but it does mean that certain knowledge sharing and important insights can get lost in there. It happens to me all the time in some of the like larger professional communities. I'll ask fellow operators, like, has anyone used this payroll tool? And someone will have asked that question 3 months ago. Mm-hmm. And I didn't see it because it got buried in a Slack archive, or it got paywalled in this case. And then in the climate space, actually, I have a friend who works in policy, electric vehicle transitions, and she has this very cross-organizational, cross-functional, small group of people. So she hacked together her own shared tech stack across their organization. She created a Google Drive link for them, a listserv. They have a recurring calendar invite just to help make sure they're staying coordinated and collaborating throughout the year, not just in a one-off conversation. And there is this tension, there's this perception that there's this binary, like you either have to be a completely private space or then it's Twitter, it's the public town square. I think by building Filament that there's this middle layer, more private and intentional than a public forum, but you can make it open and searchable and reusable. If you start with high trust communities, people who already gather, so like something like the Lean Institute even, we can give those better tools. What does that actually look like? I think that's the most important part of actually answering this question. I think it starts with invite only. So I'll build on this. If the Lean Institute, let's say, was on Filament, you've invited me in for a conversation about how we're applying this at a startup. And it's invite only, but people can see that you invited me. So, oh, Lex invited Mari. We know Lex. Lex hosts the podcast and does all of this other stuff. And then they can see both of our professional profiles and that, oh, we're connected via Twitter. And this is where our backgrounds, and they know more about me and they can see you invited me. Within that group, then there are different spaces. You can see public channels for the broadest discussions. There is where everyone is invited, and it is the, if I use a conference as an example, it's the biggest talks, it's the marquee talks. And then there are rooms for specific interests. So if we're going to get into any specific lean principles, or maybe there's a startup group, we can opt into those kinds of spaces. And then there are private chats and spaces for any closer knit conversations, more of like the breakout rooms if you want to have them, and even encrypted DMs for when you want one-on-one or one-on-a-few privacy. And the key is that then we connect these groups. So if you have one community, professional community or micro community, you're not just alone there. It's not like a single group chat or a single Slack instance. You can move insights from one group to another. So if I'm seeing chatter about adaptive learning, and I want to share that with my team, because I think it's really relevant to my team right now, I can repost that message with a comment to my group, and the content moves, but the person does not. So we prioritize
oh my God, the knowledge actually moves.
The knowledge.
This is Kismet. This is cool. It's great. Knowledge this is exciting. Keep talking about knowledge moving where it needs to move.
Yes. The knowledge moves where the person doesn't. So every piece of sharing between groups we do, we apply Chatham House rule. So the people stay protected. I talked about the dinner party analogy, but the conference analogy also, I think, speaks to this because it is more professionally focused and about knowledge and people connecting with each other. So things move between rooms, or you can see information. We want to create some of that, but also help people feel like it's safe to share some of that information, so that you don't become the person isn't prioritized and doesn't become the main character of some sort of like viral public town square. And in this digital world, AI can also help us with that too. So like lightweight AI digest can help you catch up really quickly. If you are missing a conversation, you can't be in every group at all times. You can't be reading every channel at all times. A lot of what we hear, and I've experienced talking to people, is just like the amount of content you feel like you have to try and catch up on just leaves people not wanting to dig in at all. And that's just the starting point. I think one of the things I appreciate most about lean principles is that learning is continuous and built in. So we want to bring in these existing communities, start to share these knowledge spark ideas between the communities, share between, and understand how flowing with Chatham House rules works and doesn't work. And we know we're going to learn a lot from this the moment we get started.
Thank you. So let's talk about lean principles, or in this case, lean product and process development principles. And I know you've seen, and we've talked about the 6 principles that Jim Morgan codified, which I find so simple and elegant. And one of them is product development is a team sport, which says a lot. There's a lot in that. This ethic informs everything, I think, and changes the sequence of work, as I've learned. It's how work is designed from the start to get the right people talking to each other, and how people communicate with each other when they're working together to create great products that customers actually want. I'm curious, at Filament, can you tell me more about how you're building this kind of culture where product development is a team sport, in a way that allows your team to truly creates value for customers?
Yeah. So caution, I played a ton of team sports growing up. So when you say something like product is development is a team sport, I might overuse it a little bit. I get roasted by my team all the time about sports metaphors, but I do think it really
metaphors are extraordinarily functional and useful, and I encourage you to go nuts because they're one of my favorite things.
Amazing, because they do really resonate with me, because I do think about our work like almost like we're on a field together. So we're running plays. You got to adjust in real time. We're learning as a unit. No, in our case, no one's sitting on the bench. One example, we all every day use Filament tool. We're just under 10 people, which makes it easier. It's like the size of a sports team. So it does make it a little bit easier to nurture that sense of shared ownership, but we do have to be thoughtful about that as we start to grow and scale. We use the product every day. So I think that helps us in general, just all have some idea of what's breaking and build a culture around flagging issues at the moment we see them. Something like our version of the Andon cord. And then we also have some operating principles. I think 2 come to mind for kind of how that apply most to the kind of team sports metaphor. I think one is that life's short. It's too short to work with people who aren't kind, too short to take ourselves too seriously. So we're having fun while we do it. Like just in the same way, like when you are playing a game with a team, we're all wanting to get better, but we laugh a lot, we make a lot of jokes. I'm lucky to work with really kind people. And a principle underneath that is when we do disagree, which is inevitable, we rely heavily on Rappaport's rules, which is just summarized. It's pretty much the most important part is that when you do disagree, you want to deeply understand the other person's perspective. So the first step is re-express someone's position so clearly and fairly that they think, wow, I wish I'd thought of it putting it that way. And then you can go from there and highlight maybe where your points of view differ. So I've been very lucky that that is kind of the foundation of our team, and we've gelled around that. I think the other operating principle is that we think of ourselves having a compass, not a map. And that does remind me of the article I read recently from y'all that Jeffrey Liker wrote about adaptive learning. We try to align around direction, but stay flexible on the route. So our roadmaps are short on purpose. We talk very openly about things like sunk cost. If something's not working, we may need to back up a little bit. We may need to try another way. We've cut features that we've been excited about, that I've been excited about, because they didn't deliver enough value or were too hard to develop for now and too much of a risk without seeing that value. And this mindset, I feel like, gives us some of that permission to keep learning and keep adjusting. And I think low-tech ways of experimentation, like if we have an idea, is there a way that we can try it without building it into the product or making it the smallest increment that we can test and learn from?
There's so many threads there, but we should probably talk about AI and product development, the theme of this month's design brief. I appreciate you taking time though to talk about how you think about, product development being a team sport and how you interact with your team, and in this highly competitive startup environment and in a really interesting time. But let's talk about AI. That's the theme of this month's design brief. One of the reasons I reached out to you is I knew you'd have a really thoughtful take. Given how you're keeping people at the center of how you design work at Filament, can you tell us how you're using AI intentionally kind of in the context of product development? What are some of the ways you're finding it really helpful? What would you encourage other high-performing teams to think about? There's so much buzz around AI to the point where it's pretty nauseating. I want to get concrete here about, where it's useful, where it's not.
Definitely. It is changing all the time. I think the short answer is we're experimenting because we try things and we adjust and try to be as thoughtful as possible about how we use it. To get to the concrete, like you said, the specific ways we're using it right now and finding it helpful is all of our engineers are using Claude Code. And it's not just using Claude Code, but we have a weekly session with the team. They code in public with Claude and they talk about what went well, what it's not helping them with. So we're not just using it for the sake of using it. We want to make sure and highlight for everyone where the most helpful pieces of it are, what it does well, how we can be efficient with how we use it, and make sure that we do that every week. Because like I said, it's changing all the time, it feels like. In terms of the cross-functional product team or just the whole company as a whole, the most useful thing, it's pretty simple, but the most useful thing I've found so far in the collaboration is actually the transcripts and meeting summaries. It helps us create this kind of shared memory. Every meeting we run, we aspire to, we're never perfect. You get transcripts and summarize it with AI, and then we share that out. So we share it out into a dedicated meeting channel. Or if it's too specific for the broader group, it's in a team or a project channel. And it means that even if I'm not in the room, we're a distributed team too, so this is especially helpful for that. I can see what's happening. I can go, oh, wait, this conversation happened, and I can ask questions. And then it also builds up this shared memory where we have these logs of what was discussed, what decisions were made, anything that was potentially unresolved. I've definitely noticed that we connect more when these meeting notes get shared out consistently. And it also means we can track the trends. So we can see how we're doing and make are we having some of those same action items linger, or we're talking about the same thing over and over again, or we can see how we actually resolved some certain keyboard issues. The transcripts aren't perfect. I'm sure anyone who's tried them knows, but it's a really great supplement, and I would recommend trying it, not just for visibility. It's almost just, it's a nice ritual to keep everyone connected, be transparent, especially when folks weren't in the meeting. And then finally, in terms of the actual product, our Filament product, because like I said, we use that every day, the AI inside Filament helps, it kind of ties to that meeting notes example where each channel has retrieval augmentation capabilities if we want them, which just means that we're able to customize what the LLM has access to within our chats. And so if we want to ask questions of meeting notes that were shared 2 weeks ago, or if I want to upload the latest academic AI papers into a channel with my engineering leaders who know way more about it than I do, I can ask questions of the actual document I uploaded because it feeds the retrieval augmentation. I can pull out relevant sections from that PDF or clarify complex ideas, all in the flow of a conversation with my engineering lead. So we can use it as not just a shared memory, but a social piece of learning and knowledge sharing about complicated topics as well. So I think those are the three examples I would pull for how we use AI.
No, that's excellent. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Another tricky question to ask, but I have to ask it is we know that AI uses a tremendous amount of energy. And I feel like, on the internet, there's two camps. There's people talking about it and there's people just not talking about it at all. And it doesn't seem like there's much room in between. I just saw something from, I think it was Harvard Business Review, but don't quote me on that, about how AI can help us conserve energy in other ways, right? So I'm curious, how are you thinking about the benefits and very real drawbacks and negative impacts of AI use in your work, if you can speak to that a bit?
Yes. It's the kind of question that keeps you up at night. It is a big question, and frankly, one I do think we should all be talking about a lot more. So I appreciate you asking it. The environmental cost of AI is real. And I think of it as something like climate change. It's one of those challenges where individual action isn't going to be enough. We also need collective investment, better policies, better infrastructure. And it's actually it's the kind of conversation with all the tools I described above that I'd love to host on Filament.
Yeah.
Where we invite people in. We feel like we're in a trusted space to actually start to discuss this because, as you would have guessed, I don't have all the answers. Yeah. In the meantime, I think as a company, again, more practically, I think what we can do is be mindful. So not just using it for the sake of using it in terms of actually designing for it, caching when possible, running lighter weight models, pruning non-essential queries. I think responsible use is a key part of any sort of design and building it into the product itself.
Well said. Thank you. Yeah, no, all very helpful, I think, for our listeners. Just to wrap up, I don't want to take too much time here, but back to the theme of building strong teams for a moment and sports metaphors forever. Are there,
Yes.
in the lean world and lean product and process development world, I've been so lucky to have extraordinary coaches that really feel like coaches that talk about generative behaviors, leadership behaviors, and practices that make a difference. And I'm curious, are there leadership behaviors and practices that you've personally found helpful as you lead and grow your team at Filament? And I guess part two of that question, are there, particular leadership behaviors and practices you're finding useful as you help your team members leverage AI in these thoughtful ways? Are there things you remind yourself of day to day, principles, ideas that you keep coming back to?
Yes, definitely. And actually, I think you already said it, which is curiosity. I think above all other things ties to learning, but when things are changing so quickly, and I think it also ties to sports metaphors, is just you can always be better and always be curious to learn, curious about ways to improve. Nothing replaces an in-person coach, but there is, like, tying back a theme throughout, like I have started to use AI like a coach in certain cases, like our meeting notes, where you have a transcript, you can reflect back to yourself. Hey, was I unclear? Was I talking too much? You can group dynamics. Was everyone able to participate in this meeting the way? Because we want everyone to be contributing and participating. I've made projects where I uploaded leadership principles, lessons, and I used them to interrogate my own brain. I think it could, now that I'm talking about it, it's the kind of thing that I'd be very interested in doing with lean principles as well. And with the sports, it reminds me of how you grow up being coached, you're used to getting regular feedback. You know you can always improve, and you have someone watching you off a lot of the times to tell you, hey, this is how I want you to tweak your arm, or this is what I saw.
Yeah.
Try this again. And then like when I was growing up, getting video of yourself was expensive. You had to get a camcorder out. And now with young athletes, you have phones. And so even when I've coached in recent years, it's really easy to pull out a phone and get a video and show them what you're seeing. And then as you get better, you can do that for yourself. So I see young athletes or any athletes recording themselves, and they can see where they might not have, they want to tweak how they're doing something. It just speeds up the cycle of feedback. So it's not something you use all the time, but it helps you kind of, as long as you're setting up the projects with the principles you need, it can help you interrogate your thinking, give you good feedback, and be a good neutral party. On the days when the AI hype feels scarier, especially when it pertains to things like misinformation and climate impact, I'm reminded about how some of what we're trying to do with professional collaboration directly tries to solve for some of these discussions and to solve some of these problems. With AI generated content, trust becomes even more important. Knowing who I'm talking to, knowing who you're talking to, that you're talking to the person, the example where you're inviting me to the Lean Institute, who invited them, if it's someone that you trust, will be even more important. Connecting ideas across disciplines in spaces like climate, helping a polymer scientist find out the methods that didn't work from up here in Sweden without having to fly halfway around the world to another conference, taking something like Climate Week in New York that we're ramping up for in September, for example. We have some micro communities as design partners heading into that, where Climate Week itself is a bunch of different disciplines coming together: policy, tech, capital, into a whirlwind of hundreds and hundreds of events with no central source of truth. People hack together spreadsheets. And so stitching together these communities and helping them stay connected and sharing information helps me want to keep learning and stay curious and keep testing things. And the more we can learn faster about what we're building, the better chance we have of making a difference at all in this space.
Thank you. Yeah. No, you've given us all a lot to think about. I think, well said, my goodness. And back to coaching for a moment, right? Like that, it's so true. I grew up a runner, and when you're used to getting feedback, but it's not just getting feedback. It's getting feedback with good coaches with deep respect. And in the sports world, everybody kind of knows that and expects that, I hope. And people know when a coach is doing poorly. In the business world, I think or even nonprofit or academic world, it's really different. It's hard to talk about what makes a good coach and not a good coach. And I think one of the things I appreciate most about the Lean community and LPPD community is, there's a science to coaching, and it's really fun so that you demonstrate respect for workers and that you give feedback in a way that people can hear it, to your point. So anyway, there's a lot there, and I'm just also fascinated by, like AI to help leaders reflect on how they're showing up in meetings. What an interesting thing. I remember being shocked about, there's data saying that both women and men think women talk more in meetings, but when you look at the actual data, it's not true at all. That blew my mind 5-7 years ago, and I think about it probably once a week. It's fascinating. So how cool to use AI to truly work on team dynamics in meetings, or maybe some of those lean leadership behaviors or practices to make where people are making space for all voices to be heard and knowledge to be shared in a more generative way. So just thank you. Thank you for this podcast and taking the time, Mari. Keep in touch. I hope we do run some experiments about connecting your community to the Lean Enterprise Institute community, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Lex.